You know, in the book of Revelation, there's this really fascinating puzzle that people have debated for centuries. It's all about a prophetic period of exactly 42 months. This is when a figure known as the Beast is given authority to rule and, well, to persecute. It's a huge piece of the end time story, but the biggest question has always been, when does it actually happen? And figuring this out, it completely changes how you see the whole sequence of final events. Does this persecution happen at the same time as all the other calamities, or does it come after them? Today, we're going to walk through a really compelling argument that tries to solve this puzzle, and it's based on just pure strategic logic. Let's dive in. So, here's our game plan. First, we'll lay out the puzzle itself. Then, we're going to set some ground rules for how we're going to solve it. From there, we'll look at the two main theories out there, see which one a strategic argument favors, and then finally, we'll put together the final timeline. Let's get right into it. All right, so let's get right to the heart of it. The big question we're trying to answer is this. Does the beast's 42-month reign of terror happen during the great plagues that are described in Revelation, or does it only kick off after those initial disasters are over? I mean, the answer changes everything. And look, nobody really argues about what happens. The book of Revelation is pretty clear that there's a sequence of trumpets, these horrific plagues get unleashed on the world, and there's this intense 42-month period of persecution. The real mystery, and what causes all the debate, is the when, the exact order of these huge monumental events. Okay, so before we can even start to tackle the different theories, we have to lay down some ground rules. These are the foundational assumptions the author of this particular interpretation is working with. Think of them as the logical bedrock for the whole argument. Understanding these is absolutely key to seeing how they get to their final answer. All right, so there are 5 of these core assumptions. First off, the first half week is a specific 42-month period. Simple enough. Second, the beast's rule and the prophecy of the 2 witnesses both happen inside that same window of time. Third, the first resurrection happens only after this period ends. Fourth, Satan being cast down to earth is the direct trigger that causes the beast to rise. And the last one, and this is super crucial for our timeline, the beast can't rise until the abyss is opened, and that only happens when the 5th trumpet sounds. For this argument, these 5 points are non-negotiable. So let's just lock in this key term from the source material, the first half week. When you hear this, I just want you to think of that specific 42-month chunk of time. Our entire goal today is to figure out exactly where this puzzle piece fits on the bigger timeline. All right, with those rules set, the whole debate really boils down to 2 main ideas. These are 2 totally different ways of looking at how the end times unfold, and they both hinge entirely on when that 42-month period starts. So this brings us to the 2 competing models. On one side, you've got the concurrent model. This one argues that the 42 months kick off as soon as the 5th trumpet sounds. That means the plagues and the persecution are all happening at once. On the other side, you have the sequential model. This one says, hold on, the 42 months only begin after the chaos of the 5th and 6th trumpet plagues is over. Plagues first, then the focused persecution. So let's just walk through this first one, the concurrent model. The 5th trumpet sounds, unleashing this horrible 5-month plague. People who believe this view think the beast rises immediately and starts its 42-month reign. So for them, it's all one big, overwhelming catastrophe. Plagues, warfare, persecution, it's just a storm of absolute overlapping chaos. Okay, now let's flip that and look at the sequential model. Here, things happen in a very different order. The 5th and 6th trumpets sound first, causing that scorpion plague and the death of 1/3 of all people. It's only after this massive, world-shattering devastation that the 42-month clock starts ticking. In this view, the plagues are like the opening act, the thing that sets the stage for the beast's reign, not the background music for it. So you might be asking, how do we choose between these 2? Well, the author's argument here is pretty cool. It's not based on some obscure verse or hidden code. It all comes down to simple strategic logic. It's about asking, what is the beast actually trying to accomplish? And this brings us to the absolute core of the argument. It's a simple, logical question. Think about it strategically. If you are the beast, and your primary goal is a targeted persecution of the saints, does it really make sense to launch your campaign while the world is literally self-destructing? While billions are dying from plagues and warfare? Is that the right environment for a focused, systematic campaign? And the author's answer is basically, No way. They argue these are not simultaneous events. They're two completely different phases of a plan. The plagues aren't just random chaos. They are phase 1, destabilize the world to seize control. The persecution is phase 2, and that can only really begin once phase 1 is done.
And check out this key quote from the source material because it really reveals the ultimate endgame. The goal isn't just to kill people randomly, it's to threaten the saints and make them apostatize, to make them renounce their faith. The whole system of the mark of the beast, that 666, it's a tool designed for a very specific purpose, to identify and pressure anyone who refuses to worship the beast. And that requires control and focus, not widespread random chaos.
So the logic is really simple when you break it down like that. The plagues are the tool you use to gain power. The 42-month persecution is the tool you use to force worship. You don't try to use both tools at the exact same time. First, you take over the world. Then you hunt down the dissenters. Okay, so if we follow that line of thinking, that strategic logic, the author lands on a really clear, definitive sequence of events. They argue that only one of these two models really makes sense from a motivational point of view. So let's take a look at the final resolved timeline. So here's how it plays out, step by step. First, the plagues of the 5th and 6th trumpets hit, creating just massive global instability. Then, in the power vacuum that follows, the beast rises up and establishes worldwide control. And only then, once that control is absolute, does that 42-month clock start ticking for the focused persecution of the saints. And so the final timeline looks like this. You've got the catastrophic events of the 5th and 6th trumpets happening first. They're the prelude. Then the 42-month period of the beast's rule begins, which ends with the death of the 2 witnesses. And according to those initial assumptions we talked about, this whole period ends right before the first resurrection. See? It's a clean sequential flow of events. A to B to C. Look, if there's one thing to really get from this whole analysis, it's this. In this interpretation, the great plagues aren't just happening in the background during the final persecution. They are the stagehands setting the scene. They are the prelude. They create the necessary conditions for the main act, those 42 months of the beast's reign to even begin. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If this sequential model is the right way to read Revelation's timeline, what does that really tell us? It suggests the final tribulation isn't just random, senseless chaos, but something more like a chillingly precise 2-phase strategic operation. Definitely something to think about. That's all for this explainer.